The new MSI Radeon RX 6650 XT Gaming X graphics card is intended to be the flagship model in the company's RX 6650 XT line. AMD today updated its RX 6000 series RDNA 2 graphics cards with 3 new versions, joining the RX 6750 XT and RX 6950 XT. These are intended to be product stack updates with a few advancements over the models they replace. Graphics card prices are falling and gamers are finally entering the market as summer approaches. This provides AMD the opportunity to release something new and superior, and thus in this video we will be going over the RX 6650 XT. Also, details about the products we speak about will be linked down in the description. The RX 6650 XT is built on the same RDNA 2 graphics architecture as the RX 6600 XT, which was praised for its mid-range competitiveness. It also uses the same 7 nanometers Navi 23 silicon. AMD enhanced the card in 3 key areas. The first is the GPU clock speed. The GPU speeds were increased to 2400 Megahertz from 2300 Megahertz on the previous card. Memory is the second area of improvement, with AMD increasing memory speeds to 18 GB per second, up from 16 GB per second on the RX 6600 XT. The card has 8 GB of GDDR6 memory across a 128-bit wide memory interface, which makes the memory speed increase especially useful as the memory bandwidth increases from 256 GB per second to 288 GB per second. AMD's revolutionary Infinity Cache on-die memory is circumventing memory bandwidth constraints. The card receives 32 megabytes of it, and the effective bandwidth has increased to 469 GB per second. The third area for development is at the firmware and driver levels. We saw some progress in CPU limited games. This card has the same core configuration as the RX 6600 XT with 2048 stream processors divided between 32 RDNA 2 compute units, 32 ray accelerators, 128 TMU and 64 ROP. To save board costs, AMD continues to use the PCI Express 4x8 bus interface with the RX 6650 XT. By itself, Gen 4x8 provides ample bandwidth which can be compared to Gen 3x16. The MSI Radeon RX 6650 XT Gaming X incorporates the company's latest generation twin Frozer cooling technology, which includes an aluminum fin stack heatsink, a pair of noise-optimized fans, and RGB lighting. MSI has provided a remarkable overclock of 25-23 MHz to the RX 6650 XT. Now let's take an overview of the performance that users can expect out of the MSI Radeon RX 6650. The new Radeon RX 6650 XT performs well at 1080p gaming. In titles like Cyberpunk 2077, the new Radeon RX 6650 XT produces a solid 72 frames per second average at 1080p, increasing 4 frames per second over the Radeon RX 6600 XT. Moving on to Forza Horizon 5, we see an average frame rate of 81 frames per second. Assassin's Creed Valhalla supports Radeon with a frame rate of 93 frames per second. If you have a high refresh rate monitor and enjoy esports games like Overwatch, CSGO, League of Legends, and others, you're in good hands with this RDNA 2 graphics card. Not bad, but not spectacular. The Radeon RX 6650 XT isn't ideal for 1440p gaming, but it's also not completely worthless at 2560 by 1440p. You can still outperform consoles in games like Cyberpunk 2077 with 1440p at 43 frames per second is a fairly decent combination. When compared to the previous generation Radeon 7, it is identical with 43 frames per second. Forza Horizon 5 runs at over 60 frames per second at 1440p on the Radeon RX 6650 XT, an additional 5 frames per rate faster than the RX 6600 XT, while Shadow of the Tomb Raider runs at over 100 frames per second average at 1440p. We do not recommend the Radeon RX 6650 XT for 4K gaming, but it is not worthless at 1440p either. Forza Horizon 5 can be raced through at 47 frames per second average at 4K, whereas Cyberpunk 2077 dips into 18 frames per second average. That's a commendable attempt, as is Shadow of the Tomb Raider's near to 60 frames per second average. Overall, MSI's new Radeon RX 6650 XT Gaming X is good for 1080p and even 1440p gaming. MSI's twin Frozer 8 cooling system, as usual, keeps everything cool with GPU temps of 64 centigrade under load. There will be no issues with 1080p gaming with 60 frames per second plus in AAA games and 100 120 frames per second plus in esports games. It's not a significant improvement over the RX 6600 XT, but it's a sufficient 5-10% faster or so depending on the game and resolution. Want even more power and performance? Then check out this graphics card review next.